The Coalition on Political Assassinations, or COPA, is an organization that was formed to work towards the goal of total release of all information relating to these crimes.
Now we're going to hear from a very unusual investigator, Vince Palamara, a graduate of Duquesne University, considered a leading civilian authority on the Secret Service. If anybody is an authority on it, well, he must be it, because it's very hard to get information out of the Secret Service to even admit that they were there. He is an authority on the Secret Service for the period from FDR to Reagan, and the Secret Service certainly didn't manage things very well and let Reagan get shot. His work has appeared in Investigator, Back Channels, Lobster, and Fourth Decade. He recently co-produced The Third Alternative, Survivor's Guilt, The Secret Service and the JFK Murder. We'll hear from him now, Mr. Palamara.
Okay, 10 minutes, I guess I'm going to cut to the chase a little bit. My study is basically pretty unique. It's interviewed close to 20 former members of the Secret Service, guarded Kennedy, in fact, guarded from FDR up to President Carter. One might have actually been around the Reagan days, but he was in the field office. And during the course, I'm going to take this off for a second. During the course of my research, I started out with a lot of the same beliefs and a lot of the evidence and a lot of the way things were told to us by Jim Bishop, William Manchester, the Warren Report, et cetera, that Kennedy didn't want this done. He didn't want the bubble top. He didn't want agents on the back of the limousine, et cetera, et cetera. And since my natural focus was on the Secret Service, that's always in my area of interest anyway, I delved into that. And I believed a lot of those things at first, but then as I found out through interviewing these men and comparing things, primary sources, documents, films, et cetera, through the years, I found out a lot of these things categorically are not true. JFK has been blamed for a lot of things that he supposedly didn't want done security-wise, which aren't true. I'm going to be showing a video in a second, but before I get to that, I'm just going to get to something that relates to earlier. Dr. Randy Robertson, had a presentation about basically, make a long story short, the back of the head, JFK was gone, a big, pardon the pun here, bone of contention. With researchers, I know that was bad. But anyway, when I spoke to the driver of the follow-up car, Sam Kinney, reading from my notes here, he revealed that having witnessed the assassination from the follow-up car, he was watching the back of President Kennedy's head anyway. He had to maintain a 5-foot distance. That was standard operating procedure, 5-foot distance between his car and the limousine. When the shooting happened, he saw it all happen. He also said there was no missed shot. And that's just what he said. All 3 shots hit their victims. He thinks that the second shot hit Connolly. More importantly, he saw the back of the head go off. Okay? No ifs, ands, or buts about it. He didn't know what the controversy was about. He was wondering what everybody was making a big deal about. He said this to me 2 times. I spoke to him 3 times. The first time we didn't get into the medical evidence. Gets even more interesting. Him and George Hickey were on the C-130 transport plane going back to Washington with the 2 cars, and he found the back part of the head in the limousine hours before the official limousine inspection instigated that night by Assistant Special Agent in Charge Floyd Boring. He said, I don't know what else it could have been but the back of the head. He also said he had no brains left. His brain was blown out. There was brain matter all over the place. It was the right rear. He said that twice. Mine was a big piece. Half his head was gone. It resembled a flower pot or clay pot piece. And he put in a phone patch to Dr. Berkeley while on the C-130, before they even landed in Washington. The piece went to Berkeley, and whatever happened to it, Sam doesn't know, and I guess it's up to us to speculate if it was one of the later pieces they allegedly found in the limousine, but this was separate. He was there also when they did the official limousine inspection, so it's not a matter of memory merge. He's confused. It's definitely delineated. He'll remember it forever. It's one of those things, there's no question about it in his mind, that he found on the scene with 30. So it's just a big thing to corroborate Dr. Randy Robertson's work there. I guess now, maybe I'll ready for the video, because due to time constraints.
Is that the piece that Jackie picked up and dropped in the backseat?
That's one, yeah, Clint Hill, Gerald Bain in a report. This shows something here. See all the spectators on this side, right here, okay, on Kennedy's side? Well, in Secret Service reports by John Reddy and others, they try to make it like, oh, there was no one on that side of the street. Hey, we didn't have to protect Kennedy. Boy, I guess those are all apparitions then. Who are these people? All it takes is one person to be assassinated anyway. Look at John Hinckley. I mean, this is ridiculous. Okay. Now, here we go. We see JFK being hit and all that, so we can go into big contention about what is or is not happening. Well, Roy Kellerman, who was number 3 man, I spoke to Jerry Bain, the head of the White House detail. He wasn't there. Number 2 man wasn't there. They had a third stringer. And by the way, I just recently found out this was Roy Kellerman's first trip with the president. He's looking back, first trip on his own, I should say, clarify that. He's looking back at Kennedy, sees he's hit. He says in his Warren Commission testimony, no obstacle will stand in front of me. I will protect this man. Yet, he sees he's hit. Well, I guess it's time to tell Bill Greer, which he does now, to get out of line. And Bill Greer's looking back. Ooh, break that Secret Service procedure, so I'll lie about it to the Warren Commission. I didn't see Kennedy, I saw Connolly. Uh-oh, Connolly's hit. Geez, I guess I'll have to improvise something there, too. But anyway, and then Kellerman did tell him to get out of line. We've been hit. Kellerman is putting his hand up to his mouth, the radio microphone. And little Greer here does a second turn on. Just to make sure Kennedy, let's see if he's really hit now. And then pretty soon we'll see, unfortunately, the fatal shot make its mark. Oswald or no Oswald, conspiracy, no conspiracy. We'll talk about this for years, like in ancient Egypt. We'll all go through the conspiracy theories and everything else. But if these Secret Servicemen would have did their job, we wouldn't be talking about it. So maybe we'd be talking about it in the trial, like O.J. Simpson Part 2. We'd be there trying to find out the attempted assassination. Maybe it wouldn't have been such a big deal. There's just so much more to this, and like I said, I don't, time constraints and that. I might have,
Go ahead.
might have a little bit of a fast forward through this. One second. Mark, can you fast forward just a little bit? This is like a little bit of a repeated segment. Okay. Well, that's okay, no problem. I can keep going because I'll have enough time to get to the next couple segments here. And you probably want to watch this again anyway, maybe just to see some of the things. I might as well get to them because I might not have time. Okay, one of the things was supposedly President Kennedy wanted to have agents on the back of the limousine. That was this desire, he wanted an open car and all this business. And there was 5 reports sent to the Warren Commission after the fact, 6 months later, only because the Warren Commission requested them, not vice versa. And they said that President Kennedy had told Floyd Boring, and Floyd Boring conveyed the message 4 days before Dallas that Kennedy didn't want agents on the back of the car, so obviously they obeyed it in Dallas, okay? Now, if I go into any further equivocation here, this is the Florida trip. This is the November 18th trip, by the way, right here. This is a little bit of a film clip. Well, make a long story short, those 5 reports sent? Well, I spoke to the head of the White House detail, Mr. Boring himself, and he told me it's categorically untrue. Kennedy never, ever, once told them to not do anything security-wise. The only thing this man would do is do what he's doing now, wade into the crowds. There was a real quick, there's Floyd Boring right directly behind Kennedy there, Emory Roberts. This is the only thing Kennedy did that would get on the Secret Service's nerves. This is the only thing, he would wade into the crowds. He never told them not to have the bubble top on, whether it was bulletproof or not. We can go on and on for days and whether it meant anything or not. But Kennedy had nothing to do with the bubble top. Secret Service decision, Sam Kennedy told me about it. It's in his report. He's the sole person to do it. Agents on the limousine, they lied about it in reports. Think about that. They admitted to me on the phone. Floyd Boring, I spoke to him twice. Jerry Bain, I spoke to him 3 times in one session. Spoke to Sam Kennedy several times. And Clint Hill would not reveal the name of the person in his report. Then he gets in front of our inspector of the Warren Commission and had to reveal the name of who told him not to have agents on the back of the limousine. It was good old Floyd Boring. And it goes around in a circle because Floyd Boring told me that
You know, and you could say, okay, at the end of the day, what does this mean? This means that they sent reports that were fabricated to the Warren Commission. They blamed it on Kennedy, who was conveniently dead. And it gets right down to it. Well, why weren't there agents in the back of the car? Or you can go on, there's little subplots there. Agents in the back of the car stationed. Agents in the back of the car are supposed to run. It gets even worse, or get better, depending on which way you want to look at it. Here's agents getting on the back of the limousine in Miami. Agents Zaboral and Donald Lawton. Donald Lawton was stationed at Love Field November 22nd, but wasn't doing anything security-wise. They're about to get in the back of the limousine there.
I think we better conclude now.
Okay. Is that about it?
That's it.
Wish I had more time, but...
Keep going. Keep going.
Can I have 5 more minutes?
Let it go, let it go.
Just 5 more minutes?
Okay.
Is that all right?
Okay.
Thank you. Is that all right? Okay. And basically, it's a real crying shame. Then William Manchester picked up the ball, and Jim Bishop picked up the ball. This basically, you know, laid it all on Kennedy. The bubble top, agents on the limousine, and like I said before, I was, you know, interrupted. I'm sorry about that. You know, C.M. Kinney told me, confirmed to me, Emory Roberts, when the first shot sounded. Well, let's say even pretend. Okay, Oswald's first shot, and there was no conspiracy. Okay. Emory Roberts ordered the men in the fob car not to move. And the reason why that all came about was, in Harrison Livingstone's High Treason, it was written that Emory Roberts ordered the men not to move. I said, well, where's the documentation for this? So I read it to C.M. Kinney thinking he's going to refute it, deny it, whatever. He said, exactly right, and I'm involved in that too. He admitted that Emory Roberts did that. He would not give me any kind of valid reason why he did this or not. First shot sounded, Emory Roberts told William Manchester he recognized the first shot as a shot. I said, before the headshots, before anything else, where there's plenty of time to protect the president. See, it's scary because it's one thing to do these things, and it's another thing to blame Kennedy after the fact. And William Manchester and Jim Bishop picked up the ball, and George Michael Evica did a presentation on security stripping. And some of these things might sound like science fiction and conspiratorial on that, but when you realize that they blamed it on Kennedy and they're not true, then it brings us right back down to Dallas. Why weren't these things happening? Why did they have to make up a story about November 18th that Kennedy said these things? Now, the Secret Service did a wonderful job at Love Field. This is like modern day stuff they did here. They did a great job with the trademark, which they never arrived at. They had men secured everything. I can go on for days about why they should never have been going to the trademark anyway. The early reports were like, this is a bad building, let's go to the women's building. 3 checks of the PRS's files, that's for threats. In the city of Dallas, they found not one threat. Roy Kellerman to the Warren Commission, Abraham Bolden to me even said that that was totally unusual. And right here, we'll see them get in the back of the limousine here. And I think I just need 1 more minute and I'll be done. I just wanted to just get to one more thing here. It's in sequence with this video. Oh, yeah, another huge bone of contention here with research. This has been going on for a couple decades now about the motorcade route, whether it was changed or not. Well, another thing, spoke to Jerry Bain, head of the White House detail, who did not make the Dallas trip. He confirmed to me the motorcade route was changed, said it to me twice. He didn't know the reasons why because he wasn't there. The House Select Committee asked him off the record in an executive session, why was the motorcade route changed? So they knew to ask him this. Something was amiss that they knew this. And then he said, well, you know, he said to me, well, I know the motorcade route was changed, but why, I don't know. There was alternative routes. Sam Kinney confirmed to me that there were alternate routes. So this big thing about whether they should have went down Maine, Houston, that these are security matters that conspiracy or no conspiracy, Oswald or no Oswald, they're blamed on JFK, and these things found out not to be true. And it really makes you think about, you know, we'll be sitting here right now in this conference or any of these books, if these men would have did their job. Final thing I want to point out here, this clip is the reason why this is slow mode. This is ABC footage of leaving Love Field. That's Henry Ribga there on JFK's side, about to do his job. So he was informed of these fraudulent desires. But Emory Roberts raises up, and he's in the follow-up car, and he's going like this to say, hey, no, don't get on the back of the limousine, no. And Henry Ribga is basically going like, what? What's the deal, you know? Because Emory Roberts basically told him right there, stand up, like what's going on. And good old Henry Ribga was going back to Love Field and was checking on luggage when President Kennedy was shot. And Henry Ribga's incredulity here continues because you can see him he does it a few times. Even in regular speed, you see, but I wanted you to see Emory Roberts raises out of his seat and It goes like this. He was the commander of the follow-up car who later ordered the men not to move after the first shot's on. He recognized it as a shot. So,
Which guy's Emery Roberts?
he's, okay, I'm sorry. He's sitting right next to the driver of the follow-up car. And I don't know if you can see him. It's hard to see his top of his head now. That's John Reddy. John, and another thing, to Clint Hill, all this crap about Clint Hill, he's crying about what he could have did. He was assigned to Jackie. It was John Reddy's responsibility to protect President Kennedy, not Clint Hill. He was assigned to Jackie. Clint Hill even did his job, although we can argue about that. But let's say he did his job. What about John Reddy? Where's his tears? Well, Sam Kinney told me he doesn't go to any of the annual Secret Service reunions. He's disappeared off the face of the earth. Never saw him again after 2 weeks in the White House detail after that with LBJ. And that's it.
Excellent, man.
This in a more quiet atmosphere.
Yeah, I'm sorry to take away much time. I mean, you guys can go for longer. I didn't want to hog it.
Now we're going to hear from
If you read 6 Seconds in Dallas, you know the story about that. James Rowley, head of the Secret Service, claimed that the dent was caused by routine maintenance way back in November of '61, and the Warren report is ambiguous and didn't even bother to look at the photographs available to try to resolve the question. One of the photographs they could have looked at would be this first one, which was taken by Tom Dillard at Love Field. There were many photographs taken at Love Field. Now, normally the person who's riding in the Secret Service follow-up car is the official White House photographer, but he was not riding in the Secret Service follow-up car that day. Dave Powers was instead, and Dave Powers took photos and film that have yet to be made public. But the day before, he was riding in the Secret Service follow-up car, and this is one of the photographs he took. This next one is a close-up, blow-up of another photograph that he took the day before the assassination, and shows this area of the chrome topping, which is undented. This is just the day before the assassination. It seems that
taking up the cards for questions. Before we do that, we have a little time here. I want to ask any member of the panel, if they feel that we cut them out of any deep dedication to any particular phase of their testimony that they want to get up and put on in about a half a minute.
Yeah, I got something.
All right, go ahead.
If anyone knows the actual killer of JFK, come up and say it.
Thank you so much. What is this? Yeah, this will be good.
Doesn't matter. Revert to this again. Yeah. It's hard when you got these kind of time constraints too. You got to try to put everything in like Evelyn Wood speed reading, but.
Come on. Evelyn Wood's talking about this.
Okay. Basically, Secret Service was responsible for. Oh, okay. Secret Service was responsible for the motorcade vehicle order too, which was also changed. The limousines, the motorcycles, there was 18 motorcycles allotted Kennedy on all the prior Texas stops, again unique to Dallas. It was changed at the 11th hour by the Secret Service. Allegedly, hey, Kennedy didn't want motorcycles by him because he wanted conversation, but boy, geez, just a few hours before, he didn't mind those motorcycles going right beside him. Ambulance that would have been on standby in case of injury. JFK was gone from the scene a few minutes before the shooting.
How many were there? There weren't 18.
It was 18. It went down to 4, and to make matters worse, that insult to injury, they weren't even right by him. They weren't even right in parallel. And this is all, again, blamed on JFK. And for what it's worth, Sam Kinney and Rufus Youngblood said that there's no truth to that. In fact, Rufus Youngblood threw in an expletive that I can't repeat. Basically, you got a situation to sum up, because I'll give somebody else their time. JFK and LBJ were in the same city, same motorcade, and slow-moving open vehicles in close proximity to each other. And this was unique. Winston Lawson told me this, and Abraham Bolden told me this. It's just basically that's the reason why the president and the vice president travel on different planes. You're never supposed to have them in a compromising situation so close to each other. And again, unique to Dallas. And there's old Lee Harvey Oswald. Just a coincidence, I guess. That's about it.
I want to ask you,
Sure.
There was a great advertisement way ahead of time of Kennedy's route in Dallas. And when myself and another reporter tried to get the route coming up for Houston and San Antonio, they denied it to us. And why that was, I don't know. But then they invited us to get out of the office for asking me questions.
Well, I'll tell you what, I got something on that. I do, seriously. Chief James Rowley told the Warren Commission, only because the Warren Commission asked, and it was all in letters, not testimony, he said that he doesn't know who released the route to the press, and it was not done in Dallas. Well, Bill Moyers, LBJ aide, went before the House Select Committee, and he admitted it was the agent in charge of the Dallas trip that gave them, and this was all Secret Service again. You know, Kennedy didn't mind the printing of the American, and all this crap about, JFK, rest in peace, all this stuff that they put on him about his marital affair, all this other crap. I mean, to strip him of security and to blame him for it too, but no, to ask you succinctly about the motorcade, yeah, that's exactly in a nutshell.
Let me point out to you that man, I asked over and over again to get to talk to that agent, and we kept from doing so.
Was that Bill Payne in Austin? It was Bill Payne?
No, it wasn't an agent. It was the man who arranged the advancing of the trip. Detroit.
Ooh, that could have been Marty Underwood.
But Bill Moyers came up and said he was the one who gave the okay to release the parade route.
Yeah, but you know he did it in 1978. He told the House Select Committee this was based on the authority of the agent. This is quote, agent in charge of the Dallas trip. Doesn't name him. However, on an A&E special in 1991, it was like class of the 20th century. He named the agent in a different context, Bill Payne. He was the advance agent for Austin. However, to make matters even more convoluted, that's why nothing's black and white in this case. Floyd Boring was technically the agent in charge of the entire Dallas trip. A little known fact. And I spoke to Floyd Bourne about this, spoke to Sam Kinney, and again, coincidence rears its ugly head again. The head of the White House detail, Jerry Bain, or his immediate assistant, which was Floyd Bourne, number 2 man, always accompanied the president.
How did you get these agents to talk? They won't talk to anybody usually.
I'll tell you what, I think it was my age. I mean, I'm 29 now, it was a few years ago, and I think they figured this is some young whippersnapper, this isn't going anywhere. I didn't reveal an act, so I didn't think Oswald did or didn't do it. I asked questions about security, and I think I flattered them too, because I knew a lot about these agents.
All right, now, anybody else with a heart-rending story? All right, we have one question already up here, and I presume we'll have a lot more questions.
More than one.
Huh?
Right, and Epstein said that Warren changed his mind, and Epstein was lied to by McCloy. Epstein depended on McCloy for the story, and McCloy was the one who actually picked Rankin and who actually objected to owning it.
A question for Mr. Kelly. Is Atwood...
What did you say?
He said we all have to, sooner or later.
Except me, I'm not going to do it.
This next one is Mr. Baumann, the head of the White House Secret Service for 13 years, was fired by Kennedy administration in 1963. He had been Vice President Nixon's personal driver for his last 4 years in that office. Nixon's role in the assassination of JFK is little analyzed, despite numerous examples of motive, power, knowledge, and protocols. Only someone with experience could have. Why? Well, I can tell you one thing about Chief Baumann. He was the chief of the Secret Service, not head of the White House detail. He was fired because one of the things that brought up in Mark North's book is he believed the mafia didn't exist. Went in the Washington Post and even said this along with his buddy Hoover. I think it was the natural progression from Eisenhower to Kennedy, and I think it was just time for Huey Baumann to go. But this thing about he had been Vice President Nixon's personal driver for his last 4 years in that office, that was Jack Sherwood. Jack Sherwood, you ever see the famous black and white clips of rocks being thrown at Nixon in Caracas, Venezuela? Well, Jack Sherwood, that was his driver. As far as Nixon's role in the assassination, that's not really my area. I don't know if this was directly specific, because it doesn't say Vince. I don't know if anyone wants to pick up on Nixon or anything to pick up. All the Stone's doing it, that's right.
Read the question.
Read the
Pages, I'll refer you to the book.
Spell it out. Tell us.
Well, I
What did the book
don't,
say?
well, it lists all the people, it lists a lot of the people that were up there.
Spit it out.
Well, I didn't memorize it. I'll just refer people to the book.
Name of the book.
You all are such experts that I hesitate to add anything, but you know that McNamara and everybody, they were frightened to death. They were frightened to death at this time because they didn't know what in the world was happening. They didn't know whether it was a conspiracy against the United States overseas. They didn't know whether it was Russia. They didn't know what it was, and they were so frightened. They closed the Mexican border immediately, and I always thought it was very, very funny that the Mexico was the last country to come and send a representative to Kennedy's funeral.
Okay. This one's for me. It says, where can John Reddy and Emery Roberts be reached today? It's like a three-part thing. First of all, about John Reddy, he was one of a couple agents that I'm pretty sure I reached. I got through answering machine, would never pick up, would never call me back. Not that he's obligated to, obviously, who am I? I'm just some stranger. But I do know one little footnote to him is that, I don't know if you know that book, Mortal Error. The authors of Mortal Error contacted him, and he refused to discuss the matter of that George Hickey shooting the president theory. Emery Roberts can't be reached. He died in the late 60s. And the interesting thing about Emery Roberts is, I don't like to fuel the fire speculation, but this is too good to pass up, I have to admit. Marty Vanker, former Secret Service agent, in his book quotes Jim Calafidis, the agent who protected Jackie in the early 70s in the Greek Isles, said that an agent took his own life in Washington in the late 60s with a handgun. So obviously, I don't have any confirmation that's Emery Roberts. Makes you think that. What personnel records on them asked for review board to release? I know the JFK Library Secret Service records are sealed. They are not eligible for release. There are oral histories which are real watered down. I got more from Jerry Bain on the phone. I give this oral history available. Finally, what about the security test cover story to explain Secret Service complicity? Yeah, I'll tell you what, well, that's exactly, I kind of left it unstated. Kennedy didn't want these things done, and he lied about it, and I just like that. Because of time constraints, and also I don't want to get into too much of speculation, you needed to put two sides of the coin. It's either they were sinisterly involved in covering it up, and they wanted him dead, or it was part of a security stripping test like George Michael Ubica and I have gone into, that they set him up for whatever reason, and in conspiracy or no conspiracy, someone came in there and he had to cover up after the fact because they left Kennedy a sitting duck.
Vince, did any of the agents comment on the fact that Jackie noticed that she was given red roses in Dallas, all the other women yellow roses, all other cities, everybody got yellow roses?
I didn't know. I never broached that one.
And that's those records that could be released by the board.
They could be released by the board. That would be good if they could.
The autopsy.
Yeah, George Ivica is going to say something about the security stripping test.
In March, I was invited to Boston to testify to the Records Review Board. And I spoke on 5 subjects, and I gave a memo on them. But that was the first public airing of the Bill Moyers connection. And the investigative staff did not know about the very important Bill Moyers relationship to the Austin office and the role that he played in the trip to Texas, etc. Now, afterward, I waited for any possible response, and I received a call on the phone on a Saturday morning. I was still in my robe and slippers, and it was the chief investigator for the Records Review Board. And she said, we want to know everything that you know, because I am running the investigation of these, the Secret Service and the motorcade and the changes, etc., and we want you to help. So I asked her to call back in 45 minutes, spread about 50 pounds of paper on the kitchen table, got a yellow pad out, made about 30 minutes of notes, and she stayed on the phone for 1 hour and 10 minutes, writing longhand, and I owe her now a rather long memo giving all the names, etc. I also said that if the staff had not so far got to both the book and the person, that they were missing very important information. Somebody named Vince Palamara.
Wait a minute, come back up here. Tell us, what was the Bill Moyers' participation in?
Much too long to take,
but the fact that he just knew everybody down there and he acted for LBJ in law.
Apparently, Bill Moyers was responsible for getting the motorcade route out. All right? That's the bottom line.
In Austin or where?
Out of Austin. He had a representative in Dallas. Yes, and I gave them that name and her connections to the group that organized the Civic Council. It's a rather complicated, as you well know. I did an outline of a monograph on this subject. What did it take, 2.5 hours in Dallas in the evening? Something like that. It's a monograph called Dallas Doesn't Love You. And it'll be part of, I get nothing out of this because I'm never going to finish that book, I don't think, but it is a part of the Iron Sights. But I urge you, if you don't have the thing that is in print, which is Vince Palamara's book, that you run, not walk, to get that, and then know that the Records Review Board is intensely interested in this area, all right? I argued that Connolly and his people managed the whole operation, and that he unwittingly, in fact, set up JFK in Dallas and in the motorcade. And the chief investigator is taking that with very straightly to whatever conclusion she finds. Thanks very much.
Wait a minute, wait a minute. Why did you say unwittingly?
Because I think that John Connally was the second intended victim in Dealey Plaza. I think two men were intended to die. John Kennedy and John Connally.
Why Connally?
Instead of helping.
Listen, I'm not a member of the panel, and it would take about a half hour to summarize, all right? But please do take a look at my abstract from is it last year's? No. It is 2 years ago at ASK that I did it, and I think that's available on tape. The entire, nearly the entire discussion. And I would urge you, not because, again, I'm going to make anything about it, but it is a very heavily documented piece, which is why the Records Review Board is so interested in it. But do keep an eye out for this kind of thing, and know that with the help of Vince Palamara, we may be getting at where the heart of the ambushing of JFK occurred, in Texas, in Dallas, and in Dealey Plaza. Thanks.
All right, we have one more question. We have pretty well got along pretty well for time. No, we haven't done it. We'll let you go, sir.
I don't know if he's here, but he interviewed Sam Kinney, who told him that, yes, he saw the head explode, he saw the hair fly up, and then he saw it fall back forward again. And he was the man who was driving the car right behind Jack Kennedy's head. Now, stood between the scalp and the oncoming bullet. And when the bullet impacted the back of the head, it popped the piece of bone out, leaving the scalp, which had been protected by that piece of bone, intact. And it could flap. It could flap back and it could flap forward, and that's exactly what you're seeing on these two photographs. And in fact, Vince Palamara, I don't know if he's here, but he interviewed Sam Kinney, who told him that, yes, he saw the head explode, he saw the hair fly up, and then he saw it fall back forward again. And he was the man who was driving the car right behind Jack Kennedy's head. Boswell isn't alone in that statement. I've got the Dealey Plaza witnesses who saw it coming off the rear. Brim, Hill, Kinney. Jacqueline Kennedy must have seen it because she went out to retrieve it. At Bethesda, Boswell and Ebersol inaccurately said it was occipital bone. I'm sure that he meant the occipital area because the occipital bone is intact on these x-rays. If you read carefully the testimony of Siebert, you can see that he said said the back of the head was missing. He said the missing part of the skull came in late in the autopsy. O'Neill has told Roger Feynman...
It has gone on for decades since the death of President John Kennedy. Tonight, a Tennessee radiologist says that x-rays taken after Kennedy's death prove the president was shot twice by 2 different people. 3 government panels in the past have said there was only one shooter, Lee Harvey Oswald. But Dr. Randolph Robertson says that X-rays show that Kennedy was shot twice in the head, once from behind and once from the front. Robertson hopes to publish his findings in a medical journal. Well, it's not Watergate.
2 well-known security risks have recently been put on a task force in the State Department to help reorganize the Office of Security.
Well, now who?
William Arthur Weiland, a well-known man who for over a year...
The thing, Miss McClendon, I think that... would you give me the other name?
Yes, sir. J. Clayton Miller.
Right. Well, now, I don't... I think the term... I would say that the term you've used to describe them is a very strong term, which I would think that you should be prepared to substantiate. I'm familiar with Mr. Miller's record because I happened to look at it the other day. He has been cleared by the State Department. In my opinion, the duties which he's now carrying out, he's fit for. And I have done that after Mr. Rusk and I both looked at the matter, so therefore I cannot accept your description of him.
Did you both look at Mr. William Arthur Weiland, too?
I'm familiar with Mr. Weiland. I'm also familiar with his duties at the present time. And in my opinion, Mr. Miller and Mr. Weiland, the duties that they've been assigned to, they can carry out without detriment to the interests of the United States, and I hope without detriment to their characters by your question.
Mr. President, ever since you...
One comment. Vince Palamara, who is not here, is working on a major book on the Secret Service and the assassination. And he's done he has 90 pages in... now on Greer, and it seems to be a magnificent piece of work. One of the problems that we have to face is the possibility that the Secret Service might have thought that there was a security stripping for a simulated attack on the president, and Vince is following up that story. We proposed that at Fredonia, New York, at a third decade conference. Vince explored that at Louisville in a major presentation, and I hope that he will be at Dallas when possibly he will continue that work. I'll see you at 6.
I'm going to continue taking your questions. It is 4:45 now. We're going for about a half an hour until 5:15, so that those of you who want to can get some dinner.
Our next speaker is a young researcher who's been involved in a case for a number of years and who has certainly done the right thing and said basically there's one area I want to look into, and I want to look into it as intensively as I can, and believe me when I tell you he has done so. In studying the not-so-secret service, Vince Palamara has done an incredible job of bringing some things to light. He was in the post-COPA review of last year, when people filled out the little forms and said, what did you like, what were the high points, Vince Palamara's presentation was literally at the top of the scale for what happened last year, and we're very honored to have him back with us this year. So please welcome and give your full attention to Vince Palamara as